by whose service to Srila Prabhupada we're all sitting here today. He was one of the Maha Senapatis, great generals of Prabhupada, who helped him in the very beginning to establish this International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And then many countries around the world, he started Krishna consciousness. We're all sitting here by his mercy, by his devotion to Srila Prabhupada. He was like the Himalayan mountain of Krishna consciousness, just like there's no mountains that can compare. So the mountain of love that he had for Srila Prabhupada cannot compare to Brahmananda's love for Srila Prabhupada. So for such a great personality, we're holding this Smriti Sabha this morning. So to begin, we'd like to ask our very dear godbrother and the actual brother of Brahmananda Prabhu, Sriman Gargamuni Prabhu, to present a wonderful video that he's put together for this occasion. No, give this one. This one's got all the recording in it. Give me that one.
Before I start, I wanted to have Prabhupada say something about Vrindavan, and it's a video clip of a lecture about Vrindavan, and the question is, when one comes to Vrindavan, what should he do? What do we do when we come here? And I titled the clip, Vrindavan is for hearing. And it will set the stage for what we are doing now. So it's just a small clip. Is the USB on? I might need a little help here. Put the USB. The USB. USB. And play video. And then play Vrindavan is for hearing. It's the last one. It was, no, yeah, there.
Do you need audio for this?
Yeah, Prabhupada speaking.
The Shastra says, yet without hearing, simply taking that as an opportunity. That is also very good, but that does not finish his business. He must seek out wherein Vrindavan, Krishna consciousness is going on. Dinesh obligation, where there is a person who can teach me about Krishna consciousness. That is humanity. Otherwise, when he thinks simply by going to Vrindavan, taking a dip in the woman, shaving the head and purchasing some utensils for sons and daughters, there too, be cleared by the saintly person, by their punya work. Tirthi Purvanti Tirtha. Again they make it Tirth. So therefore it is advised. So anyone who is coming to Vrindavan, they must seek out the devotees who have dedicated to Krishna consciousness and trying to
It goes very
Krishna
slow.
consciousness to the ignorant people who are busy in material activities. This is true. Therefore it is recommended.
So today, all of the Vaishnavas here are cleaning the garbage by hearing of Vrindavan. So before I show the video of Brahmananda, I first wanted to offer my respects to all the Vaishnavas present, and especially His Holiness Gopal Krishna Maharaj for his arrangement of the nice ceremony and yesterday and this morning, and for his assistance in this Brahmananda's health problems that he had. For the last few months, Gopal was directly involved in trying to bring Brahmananda back to his original health as we knew him. Prabhupada once told me, I wrote him a letter that I defeated Brahmananda in book distribution in Los Angeles. And he was the president in New York, and I defeated him. And Prabhupada wrote me back, you cannot defeat your brother Brahmananda because he is ever expanding. So in this way, Prabhupada was teaching me to be humble. Even though I'm the younger brother, I should never think I could surpass my elder brother. And so I treated Brahmananda not only as a brother, but also respectfully as my superior throughout my life. Prabhupada told me back in 1976 in Bombay that I should always take care of Brahmananda because he was a saintly person, and that's why my father disliked him. Because he wasn't a man who could produce money. And therefore, I should always see that he's taken care of. And I did that for over 30 years. I supported and took care of him, not only as a brother, but I respected him as superior to myself, and that it was my duty because Prabhupada told me that I should do this service. Prabhupada never said that I was a saintly person, but he said that Brahmananda was. And Krishna had sent him to help me in this movement of Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada told me this personally in Bombay. So he predicted the future for Brahmananda, that I should take care of them. And we came here in 2000 and been here for 15 years. And I've been make sure that he was comfortable in his life and he had everything. And Gopal assisted me in the last few months in that, and that's why I wish to offer him my respectful obeisances for that. There are others also involved. His management that helped to bring this function together. It was done very nicely, respectfully, and it was glorious. And I will be forever indebted to everybody for this. I didn't want to appear publicly because I've been suffering a little bit for the last 3 days because all this happened unexpectedly. Brahmananda he didn't have a fever. He didn't show that he was going to leave. All of a sudden, he just collapsed. And it was a shock. The doctor was there, devotees were there, and it was a shock. They were briefly outside the room, and I was there, and I had to witness it. And that was the hardest part. To witness, I wish I didn't do that. But anyway, we are gathered here this morning to glorify Brahmananda's service. Can you put the video on? Somebody who knows. It says Brahmananda Das if you go to USB again. And I'll keep it silent, and as we talk about Brahmananda and the service he performed to Srila Prabhupada, it was in, Brahmananda was always interested in India and India philosophy. When he came to New York University, where he got his BA, he took a course in Hinduism. And when I went to college in August of 1966, he gave me a book on the Bhagavad Gita, even before he met Prabhupada. And his interest was so big that 2 or 3 years before he met Prabhupada, he even went to India as a merchant marine. His interest was so great as a merchant marine, and he stopped in Bombay and stayed there for 1 week. This is him describing Prabhupada Leela at 26 2nd Avenue in New York, where we joined. So Brahmananda and I were living in an apartment in September of 1966 near the temple, and we used to go every morning to the temple and hear Prabhupada's class, which was at 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock. And it got to a point that we had to move out of our apartment and move into the storefront and sleep there, because the bed bugs and cockroaches were sucking the blood out of us so much that Brahmananda lost weight and the pukas were gaining weight. So Krishna forced us into the temple, and when we did that, Prabhupada was so happy because he couldn't meet the monthly expenses of the rent of the storefront and the apartment and the telephone, so many things. So he said, when Brahmananda moved in, my financial difficulties were solved. Because Brahmananda was a teacher and he was making $400 a month. And he used to give his entire paycheck to Prabhupada to pay for the rent, which the apartment was about $75 and the storefront was $150, which was the temple room. So every morning, Prabhupada would give class there. However, when me and Brahmananda moved into the temple room, we had worse problem, and that was rats. From pukas, we moved to rats. At night, they would jump on our bellies or our skin. And rats are cold-blooded. They're not warm-blooded. And I don't know if any of you ever felt a rat on your body. It's ice cold because our bodies are warm. So we had to endure that problem at 26 2nd Avenue. It was in the poorest part of New York City called the Bowery. There were 30,000 alcoholics that lived on the streets. And sometimes where Prabhupada was staying, when he first came, before he started ISKCON, he had to walk over the alcoholics to get into the doorway to go to his apartment where he was staying. That's how bad it was. In fact, mostly the gurus who were teaching yoga and various philosophies lived uptown. And Prabhupada lived what was called downtown. The uptown gurus were all rich. Haribo, Haribo. The uptown gurus were very rich. So one night, Swami Nikhilananda of the Ramakrishna Mission invited Prabhupada because Prabhupada was the new guru in town, so he invited him to a function where all the practicing Indian gurus attended. It was a formal social function. So Prabhupada went. However, when they got there, everybody looked at Prabhupada in awe because he was dressed in saffron as a sannyasi, and all the other gurus were dressed in suits. And so they looked at Prabhupada, and Swami Nikhilananda, he came over to Prabhupada. He said, "You shouldn't wear this. This is too foreign. You have to change to Western dress and learn how to play piano, and I will fix you up with a widow, and you will become very wealthy." This is how they tried to entice Prabhupada. And of course, Prabhupada rejected all of this and went back downtown to be with the alcoholics and the druggie and the hippies. Because that area was also the big hippie revolution was going on in the Lower East Side. And Prabhupada never met those people ever again. In fact, when Brahmananda, before he met Prabhupada, he used to go to the Ramakrishna Mission in New York, and Swami Nikhilananda, who has written many books in English, I don't know if you've heard of him, he offered Brahmananda prasadam from their offering, and Brahmananda was shocked because it was chicken. And of course he didn't accept it, because he was slowly himself, even before meeting Prabhupada, to become a vegetarian. So Brahmananda would go to his office, which was the New York City public school system. So he was made the first president of ISKCON because he took responsibility. And Prabhupada always gave the person the highest function of the society, because if one took the responsibility. Prabhupada used it. Just yesterday I heard a lecture where Prabhupada was criticizing the Babajis, that whether you wear a nice coat or a pair of pants or a dirty cloth, it doesn't matter. It's what you do for Krishna. Simply to walk around Vrindavan advertising yourself as a Babaji with dirty cloth is not doing anything for Krishna. You have to follow the 6 Goswamis, who wore dirty cloth but did everything for Krishna. They excavated the entire Vrindavan, Brajabhumi. They wrote hundreds of books, which is the backbone of our ISKCON movement. They did something, and they wore dirty cloth. So simply to advertise oneself, one should not do this. This is offense, Prabhupada said. And do nothing. And advertise, oh, I'm a great Babaji, I have dirty dress, and do nothing. So this way, Brahmananda became the president, and then Prabhupada, I was 18 years old, just turning 18, I was 18, and he made me the treasurer. And he taught me bookkeeping. I was uneducated because I left college after 3 days, and called my brother, and he said, come to New York. I've met Prabhupada, I've met the Swamiji, you come. So I flew back, and so I was uneducated boy. I didn't have college education, but I had in my blood numbers. I could do numbers very good, Prabhupada said. So he taught me how to keep a record of debit and credit and trial balance, and my office was in his room. So while Brahmananda was teaching a school at a Christian school, I was in Prabhupada's room learning how to be the treasurer. So as Brahmananda took more and more service to the society, he eventually quit his job and he turned to Prabhupada's greatest desire was to print books, especially the Gita. I know for a fact that for 10 years, Prabhupada tried to get his Gita printed. In India, I found manuscripts at the Radha Damodar temple in a trunk of Prabhupada writing his Bhagavad Gita in the 1950s. He started. Prabhupada started his manuscripts many years before he came to America, but never completed them, so he would start again and again. So Brahmananda spent his time sending a sample of Prabhupada's manuscripts to many publishers, but nobody agreed. Then in December of 1966, we made a record. I don't know if you heard that record, Krishna Consciousness, with this record maker, Mr. Coleman, who's still alive. In fact, if you go to the museum in Prabhupada's house, you'll see the first record which Mr. Coleman sent to India to be in the museum. So we made this record. So there was a station, an all-night station, which had its signal all over the world. It came on at 12 o'clock at night, and for 6 hours it would stay on. So I went to the studio and played this record, which was heard all over the world. And the people were so inspired by this record, they played it over and over for 6 hours. And because of that happening, we got letters from all over the world. And one letter came from a junior accountant from Macmillan. And Prabhupada saw the letter and he said, "You don't reply this, you bring the record to this man." And Brahmananda said, "Why? He's not even an editor of Macmillan." He said, "No, you go and you will see what happens." So Brahmananda went and brought the record and was playing, showing the man, and he purchased it. And all of a sudden, one of the top editors of Macmillan saw Brahmananda, this man with a shaved head, in the office of this junior level accountant. And he entered the room and introduced himself as the senior editor of Macmillan. And so they were talking, and then it got down to the point where haphazardly Brahmananda mentioned, "Oh, I have a manuscript of Bhagavad Gita." And immediately the editor said, "You do? We've been looking for our catalog of Oriental philosophy for a Bhagavad Gita. We want this immediately." And Brahmananda was shocked because Prabhupada knew this was going to happen. And he was, flabbergated that this was taking place. And immediately they wanted this manuscript. And in 1968, it finally got published. I have one of the editions. It's not the first edition. Somebody else has that one. I gave as a gift. But I want to show you. that first edition. This was printed in 1968. This is the Macmillan original book that sold for $3. Yeah. And Prabhupada was so pleased because after 10 years, many manuscripts, we sent this samples to every publisher in America, and nobody wanted it. But Prabhupada got the biggest publisher in the world, Macmillan, to take this, and it was printed. And later on, they said of all the Oriental literatures, this edition was the biggest seller. They had to print it 13 times. 13 times over the years to make this edition. And then they printed a hardbound copy even, an expanded one. This was the condensed one. They printed the hardbound copies. So Prabhupada was very pleased. And then after a certain time, Macmillan allowed us to take over the copyright and print the book. They said that it was the most popular book of their entire catalog for Oriental literature. So this is the extent of hearing. Prabhupada wrote in a letter, he said, I am printing these books not for reading, but for hearing. Now what does that mean? How do you print a book and hear it? Actually, in the early days of Los Angeles, I remember Prabhupada encouraged us. We had only Bhagavad Gita and teachings of Lord Chaitanya and Nectar of Devotion. We used to sit on the lawn in front of the temple, either one devotee or a few devotees, and read out loud. Prabhupada encouraged us not to read silently, but to do hearing. And that is meant that I have written these books not for reading, but for hearing. When you read Prabhupada's books, you should hear it, because then you won't fall asleep. You fall asleep by reading. But if you're reading and hearing, how can you fall asleep? It's impossible. So Prabhupada was very instructive in that way. And devotees used to do that. And Vishnu John sometimes would take one or two brahmacharis. They would sit down on the lawn. We had a big lawn in Los Angeles. It was a big church. And he would sit down and read out loud to the brahmacharis. Vishnu John was very expert in training up the brahmacharis in Los Angeles. And so this is what it means to hear Prabhupada's books. So I suggest, if you want to get the most out of Prabhupada's books, when you do read his books, read it out loud to yourself, and you will get a lot of mercy from Prabhupada, because this is a direct instruction by Prabhupada. I have the quote. If you doubt me, I can show you where Prabhupada says this, that I'm writing these books for hearing. So anyway, Brahmananda was responsible for this. I need to put this, you can put it on the table. Then, the next project, 5 years before Brahmananda came to Prabhupada, he was in a car accident. And he sued the insurance company. And the insurance company, after 5 years, while Brahmananda was in 22nd Avenue, paid the money, $5,000. And he gave the entire amount to Prabhupada for the printing of teachings of Lord Chaitanya. And Prabhupada acknowledges Brahmananda in the book itself, as well as many devotees who did the artwork. I can tell you, if you look at the artwork, which was drawings, Prabhupada actually did those drawings himself through the hands of Govindadasi and Goshunda, who were husband and wife. because Prabhupada, they didn't know any Leela of Lord Chaitanya in 1968. Prabhupada gave them the direct instruction how to do those drawings. I don't know, did you see those drawings? Those are done by Prabhupada himself through the hands of Govinda Dasi and Goshunda. So this was the next book that Brahmananda got published. Teachings of Lord Chaitanya. This is the original. This is 1968. This is my copy. Brahmananda also had a copy. I'll show you some. So these are some of the drawings that are done in pen and ink, which is very tedious work. These are done with a pen, a black pen and ink. And they made these drawings according to Prabhupada's instruction. Personally, he met with them every day how to do these drawings. So actually, he did them. So this book was printed by Dai Nippon. Brahmananda was in charge of Dai Nippon, of doing the negotiations for printing Prabhupada's books. And this gave Prabhupada the greatest pleasure to see these books being published. Not only that, but Back to Godhead was eventually published in Japan. And while I was there, we were printing 500,000 copies a month in America, just for America. 500,000 copies. And Los Angeles was selling 50,000 copies every month without any problem. Because in those days, I was making incense, spiritual sky. I was the first to make strawberry incense and cherry incense. And the Americans go crazy after those things. So we would if we gave them a Back to Godhead, they wouldn't take it. But if we gave them a pack of incense with the Godhead, they took it right away because it smelled like strawberry. And the Beatles came out with a song called Strawberry Fields Forever. So I named the incense Strawberry Fields Forever. And because of that, they bought it like hotcakes. And we sold 50,000 rupees with 50,000 packs of Strawberry Fields Forever. So this was, of course, direct inspiration that I got from Prabhupada, how to market Krishna conscious. And through that, through Spiritual Sky and marketing it in the proper way that Americans would accept it, all the temples, they moved out of their storefronts and moved into churches and buildings. We now became an established movement. You see? So this is all due to book publishing. That was the backbone. And Brahmananda was in charge of that at that time. So this is the second book. And the third book was the most important, the Krishna book, in 3 volumes. And Prabhupada, it happened, the story was George Harrison promised, when he met Prabhupada, he promised to give 19,000 rupees. Is there some water? Some funny? Cold. There was he gave 19,000 rupees for the printing of Krishna book. Huh? Yeah, I'm sorry. What did I say? Oh, I did? No, $19,000 for the printing of Krishna book. So we got a telegram in New York to go to the Apple Records, which was the Beatles record company called Apple Records, and pick up the check. It's waiting there from George Harrison. So Brahmananda went there. So they gave him the check. It was in an envelope. And Brahmananda was very careful, very intelligent. One must be intelligent when he does devotional service and not be blind. So Brahmananda took the check out and saw it was $1,900. And immediately he got angry. He said, "Where's the other?" And the man, he said, "Oh, no, it's 1,900, not 19,000. They were cheating, Prabhupada." And he threw the check back. He said, "No, I want the full amount." So finally they came and gave the real check. But just see how cheating these people are. Eventually George and the Beatles, they fired those managers for cheating. So Brahmananda got the money and he negotiated with Dai Nippon. And Prabhupada wanted this book very badly. He even sent Brahmananda to pick up the advanced copies, but it wasn't ready. And Prabhupada was very displeased. Brahmananda got on the plane. And as the plane was starting up its engines in Tokyo, 3 limousines came onto the tarmac, the airport tarmac. And it was the executives from Dai Nippon with the advanced copies of Krishna book to give to Brahmananda and bring to Prabhupada. They gave him, I think, 2 copies. 25. He sold one of them on the plane. And he thought Prabhupada would be angry, but Prabhupada was very happy. So again, Brahmananda fulfilled Prabhupada's desire by doing the Krishna book, Back to Godhead. In fact, for a while, we had our own press before Dai Nippon called ISKCON Press. And we used to print Back to Godhead there, and many devotees were involved in that. However, we weren't very expert. When Prabhupada got the advanced copy of Nectar of Devotion and he opened it up, the binding broke in his hand. So it was, we weren't perfect. Nobody is perfect in Krishna conscious. And Prabhupada accepted that, but you also had to take the flak when you made a mistake. You know, I had to take the flak once, where Prabhupada criticized me openly. Prabhupada was in San Francisco. Excuse me. And what happened, the area was called the Haight-Ashbury. That's where the temple was. It was becoming crime-ridden. And somebody crashed through at night Prabhupada's window. One man wanted to steal because there was a lot of drugs called methadone. There was a methadone epidemic where people were injecting drugs into their arm. On many occasions, I used to walk down the street in Haight-Ashbury's and see people talking to parking meters as if they were people. That's how high they were. They thought the parking meter was a person. Many. This drug was very bad, methadone. Even my wife at that time was hooked on it, on methadone. And who was supplying it? That's another story for another day. They were great devotees who were supplying it. So anyway, they called me up at 12 o'clock at night. They said, Prabhupada's coming in the morning. I was in Seattle with Upendra. We opened the temple there, and it's still going on. And Narayan, who Prabhupada gave the nickname Vishwakarma because he could build things very nicely. He was making the Sringasan for Lord Jagannath and the Vyasasana in the house that we rented near the University of Seattle. And they called me, they said, Prabhupada's coming in the morning, you have to get a place. And I said, oh my God, it's 12 o'clock at night, how am I gonna rent a place? And he's coming at 10 o'clock in the morning. You can't do this. He said, no, Prabhupada's leaving, they crashed through his window, and he said, get me out of here now. some man crashed through the window to steal money for the drug. So immediately I had to find some place the next morning at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, because Prabhupada was coming at 10. So I found an apartment in a small building. And Prabhupada arrived, and we drove him to the apartment, and he came into the apartment. Immediately he went to the window, and he opened the curtains, and he went like this. Believe it or not, there was another building there. So there was no light. And Prabhupada went like, he said, Gargamuni, you have put your spiritual master in a dungeon? I go, oh my God, you know. So it was a temporary place, but I had to take humbly that Prabhupada didn't say it angrily. He said it actually smilingly in a satirical way. You have put your spiritual master in a dungeon? There was no light? So anyway, later that day, Jayananda and me went out, and we got a nice house on a hill overlooking the city with flowers and everything. So everything was, but one who was with Prabhupada not only had to serve him, but also take the mistakes that you did. And we learn by the mistakes, you see? So that's called humbleness. We all have to learn that. If your superior says something you did wrong, you accept it. That it's an instruction. You learn from it. Not that you say, okay, you can't say that against you. No. That is not a Vaishnava style. So as as a person who served Prabhupada directly, we had to take so many things that we did wrong. And everybody wasn't perfect. So when the Nectar of Devotion, Brahmananda, he printed that book also, so that's the fourth book. I don't have an original copy of that. Of course, nobody wanted those because they broke apart. The binding wasn't proper. Later, they fixed it. But that's all the books that Brahmananda got printed. And that was the most pleasing activity to Prabhupada, was his books publishing. And so later on, see, Brahmananda, he did service that nobody else would do, like go to Africa. Nobody wanted to go to Africa. It was a dangerous place, and preach to the Africans. Who could do that? But Brahmananda went. Prabhupada sent Brahmananda to West Pakistan, and he sent me to Bangladesh, which was East Pakistan. And we didn't know that India was at war because we didn't read newspapers. Now I do, so I don't get in trouble. And when Prabhupada found out that we had left, he then wrote a letter saying, don't go, but we had already gone. And there was no internet then. And the telephones didn't work. So I landed in Bangladesh, and everything was on fire. I said, what's going on here? The cars were on fire, and there was no taxi. I had to walk 15 miles with my danda and my backpack in a sannyasi in a Muslim country. And we had 500 people following us because they never saw people like this. White people wearing, saffron in Bangladesh in 1971 with a war going on? Not possible, but it happened. And Brahmananda ended up in a jail in Turkey. He was hitchhiking. You see, I was lucky. I found a student who wanted to come with me, and he was rich, and he paid for the airfare to Bangladesh. But Brahmananda wasn't as lucky as me. He had a hitchhike through Turkey, and he got arrested because they thought he was a Christian monk. And they took his books because they thought he was preaching the Bible. And they sent the books, the police, they put him in jail, and then they sent the books to the university to check. What are these books? And so the university said, oh, no. This is different. This is not Christian. Don't worry. So then they let him go. And by hook or crook, Brahmananda got to West Pakistan. Meanwhile, I was in the middle of a war, and I had to get out because they were doing genocide against the Hindus. Just recently, Bangladesh, I think they hung the man who did the genocide. He's like 90 years old. He went, while I was in Bangladesh, I had some books translated, small books, into Bengali. All those men were murdered. They used to put red marks on the door of the Hindus, and at night, the murderers would go in and kill the whole family. Millions of Hindus died in that genocide. I was staying at the Gaudiya Math that Bhaktisiddhanta opened in the 1930s. We used to have programs every night there. And most of the people who came were Muslims. They asked very intelligent questions. And they were very friendly towards us. And we had nice discussions, me and my companion Brahmachari. So anyway, we found out that they had put a red mark on our door. That means they were going to come and murder us. So the Brahmachari there said, you have to go. I didn't want to go because I was failing Prabhupada. That's the worst thing, to fail. Once he gives you an order, you have to do it. You have to have unflinching faith. Prabhupada said that is the secret in Krishna consciousness. The secret, he said, is to have unflinching faith in Guru and Krishna. That no matter what, even if you die, you have to do your service. But I didn't want to become a martyr for nothing. Prabhupada, that's also against our philosophy. We preach, we're invited. If we're not invited, then don't go there. So we don't do suicide. So Prabhupada said, so anyway, we left that morning. And it was very dangerous to be on the streets. And I came to the airport, and there's a whole story about that, how we got on the airplane. But Brahmananda was stuck in West Pakistan. So, and I ended up in West Pakistan also. And I tried to preach there, couldn't do it. So meanwhile, Prabhupada is in total anxiety because in the newspapers it said 3 Hare Krishnas were killed, were murdered in Pakistan. And Prabhupada was so upset. He said, did I send these boys to their death? And so when we finally arrived, I arrived on Ram Navami in 1971, 71, April 71, I think it was. And the Pandal was going on in Bombay. And when I came into Prabhupada's room, Prabhupada jumped up and hugged me and held me tight around my body. And I felt something leave my body, like so many sinful activities just going up in smoke when Prabhupada did that. And then I fell to the floor and grabbed his ankles like I did in New York when he left after his heart stroke in 1967. I grabbed his ankles and wouldn't let him go in the car. And what did he do? He bent down and slapped my back and pulled my hair. And he said, that's all right. And then I let go. So similarly, I held his ankles and I buried my face in his lotus feet. And then he slapped me so hard on the back and pulled my sika very hard. And he said, "That's all right," again. And he was so happy to see me. Everybody was fasting. And he said, "You cook for Gargamuni right now. Make him some puri and aloo sabji. He must take prasadam now." Everybody was jealous because I was eating and they had to fast. And I told Prabhupada the whole story, and he was so fascinated by it, you know. And then he said, "Where's your brother?" I said, "He's there, he'll be coming." I didn't meet him there, but I knew that at least Prabhupada knew that we weren't dead. He knew because I came, and he knew that Brahmananda did come later. So anyway, Brahmananda, he did so many services that people would not do. What's the other one? When we got to Juhu land, who did Prabhupada call to cut with the machete all the bushes? Because it was a jungle. It was Brahmananda. He went there in the heat of Juhu. You know, Juhu didn't even have a road then. It was a dirt road. Now, if you've been to Juhu, it's all built up. But in those days, 1972, 3, there was no road. It was a dirt road. And it was Brahmananda who went there to cut with a machete to clear the land, especially in the front of the land. So he did also that. He went to Kenya, to Mombasa. He did all these wonderful things. And that's why Prabhupada treated him as his most beloved son. Not only that, he was the longest serving secretary for Prabhupada. Actually, most of the devotees, they couldn't, who were the secretaries, they couldn't last very long because Prabhupada was very demanding. And you had to have a certain mentality to tolerate that. Shruti Kirti was good. He was always humble, but other devotees failed. He was always humble. That's the important thing. And Brahmananda, being the secretary, he had to do so many things, typing and going here and there. He was the longest serving secretary. Wherever Prabhupada went, he went as the secretary. So many services, so many things, it's superhuman things were going on with Brahmananda. And I was in India, he was in Africa. We you know, in those days there's no email, there was only, you know, sending letters. And so these things were going on with Brahmananda. And that's why he tells so many nice stories. This video with the sound is 70 minutes. And you'll hear wonderful stories. And you can have it for 100 rupees. This video of Brahmananda and the stories he tells about his life of Prabhupada. And if you really want to know all of the stories, you can get his book. And I wrote in this book, in loving memory of Brahmananda Das, June 7th, 2015, 3:20 p.m. Signed Gargamuni. That's the time that my brother left his body. So he had a glorious life, and thanks to Gopal Krishna and his management, he had a wonderful ceremony, arti, circumambulation, going and due to Dinabandhu, they graciously asked me to light the fire, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't even watch it. So I'm indebted to Dinabandhu for performing the ceremony so perfectly. And I'm indebted to all the Vaishnavas who took part in this room. Please offer my respectful thanks. that's all. Yeah. Yeah, you know, because you go there. I know. So you know what it's how dangerous it is. Well, especially when Brahmananda went, there was a war with India. So I have one thing, excuse me. The first thing that Prabhupada did when he came to New York, before he had books, he brought some Bhagavatams and Easy Journey, he bought a tape recorder. Why? Why would someone from a village in Vrindavan buy a tape recorder? This is the original tape. That he recorded his own lectures. Sometimes there was nobody present. It was only him. And he would record himself. And on many occasions, Prabhupada, after giving the lecture, we would bring the tape recorder to his room and we would replay the whole lecture. And Prabhupada, oh, he said, so nice. So he was enjoying his own lecture. And that proves what he says, that I am not speaking. Krishna is speaking through me. Who listens to his own recordings? Even rock stars don't do that. They don't listen to their own music, they listen to other music. But Prabhupada was rejoicing in listening to his own lecture. Amazing. I witnessed it myself. And Prabhupada would smile. He said, so nice philosophy. So I just wanted to add that. This is the original. I was in charge of setting up the tapes for Prabhupada's lectures in New York, the early lectures of 1966. And these are the one of the original tapes that we used to put on the tape recorder.
So we have another spiritual giant, Mahasenapati Srila Prabhupada. His Holiness.
Put it here, then you can open it. I want that.
It's 100 rupees.
Thank you.
And there's a devotee here
Put it upstairs, then you can
who would be
organize.
Yeah, yeah,
on
yeah.
behalf of
No, I have to move.
Yeah.
Oh, don't do that. The water's in there.
Chinta Chaitanya Prabhu. We have
It's okay. No, it's okay.
My dear God brother, Brahmananda Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Your departure from this world to be with Srila Prabhupada came very suddenly. I was in the ICU of ILBS hospital when I was informed of this news by Gopal Krishna Maharaj. I have been in the ICU for the last 30 days and was discharged to the general ward only yesterday. Although I wish that I were there for your memorial service, my present health condition does not permit me to travel to Vrindavan today. So I have asked my disciples, Achintya Chaitanya Das and Shiromani Devi Dasi and their little son Madhav Das, to be at the memorial service in Vrindavan on my behalf and meet with Gargamuni Prabhu, your dear brother. Last year in October, while I was in Delhi, you were very kind to send me your newly released book titled Swamiji about your pastimes with Srila Prabhupada. That book is a great delight. You were a devotee since ISKCON's beginning days in the Storefront Temple in New York. I noticed that in the foreword of the book, Professor Thomas J. Hopkins, who started visiting different ISKCON events since its early days, makes a very important observation. Quote, "There were many young people at these events, and it took me a while to get to know them as individuals. It didn't take long, however, to recognize Brahmananda as the most knowledgeable among them. Bhaktivedanta must have felt the same way because he increasingly relied on him. Bhaktivedanta soon chose him to be secretary, and he was also appointed president of the temple, and thus Bhaktivedanta's chief assistant. When Bhaktivedanta held a public event, Brahmananda stood literally and figuratively at his side, ready to do whatever he was asked to do. If Bhaktivedanta gave a talk, Brahmananda was often asked to read aloud or recite from memory scriptural passages that Bhaktivedanta cited. And he served as an intermediary to facilitate exchanges between Bhaktivedanta and his audiences. Except for these public sessions, Bhaktivedanta stayed mainly at his apartment by working in his many writings. The running of the temple was largely up to Brahmananda, who, in addition to being Bhaktivedanta's secretary and temple president, also held down a regular full-time job for 2 years as a teacher in the New York City school system." End of quote. This shows your surrender to Srila Prabhupada and the responsible and dependable role that you played in the formative years of ISKCON. You gave your entire paycheck of $400 a month to Srila Prabhupada. When Srila Prabhupada had a stroke and was admitted in the hospital, you fearlessly took Srila Prabhupada against the doctor's advice out of the hospital from the front door after some days because Srila Prabhupada wanted to go back to the temple. I had mentioned about this in a lecture a few years ago, but you were annoyed with me that instead of mentioning that you had taken Srila Prabhupada out of the hospital fearlessly through the front door to the front door, out the hospital to the temple, I had mentioned instead that you snuck him out of the hospital and hid Srila Prabhupada in the basement of our temple. I didn't know then. That is how I was earlier informed of this incident. After hearing from you directly through your book, I now stand corrected.